Been involved in farming and agriculture forever, really. If you went to our family, so I've got 5 brothers, and we used to have in our lounge room when we were little, everyone sort of had a space under the lounge chairs, and so all 5 of us had a space each, and we had little farm tractors and our sheep and whatever, and 4 of us had the armchairs and Michael had the couch, and so when you're talking about succession, I think that's still following on, but we used to do it. So we were doing that like 50 years ago. So what I'm going to talk about, there may be some formatting issues with this because it's come up a bit different, but I will just tell a little bit about the story, particularly the last 20 years since Nuffield. I think it's 22 years. And just some of the learnings from that and then what I'm doing now. And this is not to be taken as a recommendation, particularly for new scholars, because part of Nuffield is this blessing that you get your eyes open and your mind open and you can see so many things in the world. And you can't ever change that. You can't unsee stuff and you can't unlearn stuff. But the blessing of that, the curse is you always see stuff and you see opportunities, you're out there and you're always trying to do something different. And I've got a mate who, I think when I got my Nuffield, he sold his sheep. So he was not a Nuffield scholar, he was a farmer, a client of mine. Sold his sheep, turned his shearing shed into a machinery shed, bought a John Deere tractor, a DBS and a Land Cruiser. And I think that's all he's done for the last 20 years. And he just sold his farm for $1 squillion a year ago. And his John Deere tractor was worth more than it was 20 years ago. His Land Cruiser Ute was worth more than it was 20 years ago. And his DBS. And I mean, what have I been doing for the last 20 years? I should have just sat on that farm in the Great Southern and made my money doing that. So I'll just talk a little bit about the story. I'll talk about Chia, which is was sort of looking at trends in the food industry and health foods, and then developing a chia crop and turning that into a plant-based food company, which is what Fancy Plants is. I'll talk about Living Farm, which is I was starting at the same time, which is not again a recommendation, but it was looking at crop research and how do we. At the time, it was in sustainable farming and soil amelioration and soil carbon, and I was importing humic acid out of Western China and doing all sorts of stuff with Living Farm, but ultimately said if we're going to do this work on research, we need replicated research and we need a proper R&D company, which is what we formed. NACRA I'll talk about, which is up in the Ord, may not be in this order, and then Augment Agriculture, which is a farming business. I was reading this report the other day, and it's about the new consumer, and it talks about the new consumer is going to be knowledge about the connection between diet and health. The new consumer searches for Alexa and ageing, faced with rising health care costs, have concerns about food safety, food production, the environment, receptive to new lifestyle products, e.g. nutraceuticals, natural, organic, food plus or minus, e.g. low fat, high fat, increased protein. Increasingly like to have a non-traditional household structure, so changing household structure, not mum and dad and 3 kids, and that's happening. Increased pace of life, blurred eating occasions, so the deskless, where you eat your breakfast at the desk when you're at work or in the car on the way to work. Shopping from blurred retail channels, so buying more food from petrol stations than they do from supermarkets, and these sorts of things happening. And craving convenience, ready to make, ready to prepare, ready to eat, ready to heat. So that report was my Nuffield report from 2001. Same issues 22 years later. So I was studying food trends and agriculture trends, and I was trying to synthesise that into deliverables for Australian agriculture. How do we stay competitive, remain competitive? So it's interesting, the trends and what you see today and the topics of today were the topics of 20 years ago. And when it was 2021 when I travelled, I landed in the UK, and it was foot and mouth broke out the day I got there. And it wasn't me, but so that meant the last thing, as a scholar, people didn't want people travelling from farm to farm. So I spent a lot of time in London, a lot of time with retailers, which was really good, a lot of time with food manufacturers, processors, NGOs. Look up Friends of the Earth in the UK, how many members they've got and how much political power they've got. I then travelled, and it was, I think it was this day in 2001, that I'd booked my flights to the US, and it was after 9/11, like literally. And so I got there, and it wasn't so much about 9/11 and terrorism, but there'd been an anthrax in the mail. And so the biggest concern, I was studying traceability and supply chain provenance and all that sort of stuff, and it became highly topical because people put anthrax in the mail to some politicians and they thought they were going to put products like anthrax into the food industry. And so water sources and McDonald's were all very concerned about where's their food come from, who had the chance to adulterate that in the process. So I was having some really good conversations. Anyway, one of the things when I came back from that travel was I saw some mega trends and I wanted to develop businesses that participated in that. And one of those was health and wellness, which was going from, you know, an interesting thing in Northern Hemisphere, certainly booming into mega trend. I also saw the rise of organics and people not really understanding why they wanted organics, but, you know, I was trying to understand the human behaviour and the psychology behind it. And I remember talking to some people at a farmer's market in London, Portobello Road, and I said to them, I asked these people, why do you come to the farmer's market? Because there's a perfectly good Tesco around the corner that's got little mists on the fruit and veggies, and there's underground car parking, and it was raining and it was cold. And their number one thing was connection with the person that produced the food. And so as I was developing Chia and other businesses, I was thinking, how do we use any ability to have sort of a global farmers market? How do we use technology? How do we use modern supply chains to replicate what consumers were looking for? So that's been part of what I've been about in the last 20 years. This has been a 20-year journey of sort of evolving the industry and then sort of moving to something beyond where I started with Chia, but there'll be some photos of people in the room and it's great. One of the good things about Nuffield is if they may be the people that you've met along the way, met through Nuffield, but there's so many people in the room today that I've either done business with, partnered with, supplied with, to employed. So there's just this network builds and builds. It's amazing. But Chia is like there's 5 phases. The first was developing a chia crop, so totally unknown crop, something I'd discovered in Mexico, thousands of years old crop, but wasn't grown in a scale that could be used by the food industry or food retailers. There was no consistent supply, pricing or quality standards. So grew the crop with my good mate Fritz, who grew most of it in the Ord in the early days. But this was from zero base, no agronomic package, no chemical use, had to develop all the minor use permits, had to work out how to harvest it, seed it, clean it, put a quality standard, what do you measure for, what don't you measure for, then provide that to the food industry, get the food industry to understand it, why would they use it, how do they use it, test it, show it all of the efficacy of Chia in products, and then develop into a global supply chain. So we did that. And it took me from the Ord Valley, there's myself and Fritz, but also then with a lot of other great farmers in the Ord Valley who'd come out of the sugar industry and into Chia. So it was a good time. And then did it in, I think, 15 countries. So I was growing Chia in Paraguay, Bolivia, Northern Argentina, Peru, Ecuador, Nicaragua. We had a big project under pivots. That's there. Sudan, South Sudan it was, Tanzania, Kenya, good crops in Kenya, and a little bit in Zambia. So growing this, Chia's photoperiod sensitive, so it grows between 15 and 20 degrees north and south of the equator, ideally, but up to 0. And if you go below that, the day length doesn't allow the conversion of omega-3 in the oil. So it's importance in that range. But so I had some amazing experiences growing Chia and teaching how to grow Chia to a lot of people around the world. And then had some great ambassadors. So this is Kelly Slater, the 11 times world champion surfer, who was a brand ambassador for a while. And one of the things I loved about Kelly, he said, I have been courted by Red Bull to come out and sort of promote their Red Bull energy drinks, but I believe in natural and healthy. But for me to come and work with you, I've got to come to the farms. I've got to work and meet the guys who've grown the crops. I've got to talk to the farmers. I've got to get on the farms. And he did that and spent, I think he missed his flights and spent 2 more days than he should have. And it was just a great experience. Really good guy. And I can see why he's become such a champion. The next thing was building this brand. And we sort of, the orange was, from the colour of the soil in the Ord Valley, some of the Aboriginal artwork palettes, and we use that as the inspiration. Also, it's the same colour the fast food industry uses because it promotes hunger. But we used that brand and got it across the Chia industry globally, and you can see some fun things like little pop-ups at Flatiron in New York and London Bridge. And then work not only to put it in our own brand, which we still do in various parts of the world, but also as an Intel inside ingredients. So Chia in noodles, juice, and Hovis the biggest bread manufacturer in the UK. The next part of the phase was we could see that Chia was quickly getting commoditised, and I was moving into convenience. I could see that convenience trend, and so I moved into Chia puddings. In fact, the genesis of that was a Whole Foods demonstration making Chia with coconut milk in these little puddings, and the consumers would go, "We love the story about Chia, but how do I make these Chia puddings?" So we were making them and serving them up, and then commercialised it and sold those around the world. And then a couple of years ago said, we've gone really deep on Chia. The commodity market's getting tough. It's very price sensitive. The retailers now sell more Chia than the branded. I still supply major retailers, but we were moving up the chain and close to the consumer. And that was then, we said, how do we go from being a really dedicated, deep Chia company into a plant-based food company and give us the latitude to be able to go further? So we created Fancy Plants in 2019 and launched that in 20. And now sell a range of plant-based chilled snacks around the world, mostly chilled in Australia, but the Chia puddings are now under the Fancy Plants brand, and then rice puddings, coconut-based products. And these protein puddings are out of faba beans, grown in Victoria, processed in Victoria, and we manufacture them in our factory in Melbourne. And the chocolates become the #1 selling plant-based product in Australia in Coles and Woolies. Coles, and the chocolate silkies is the #1 in Woolies. So yeah, this is exciting, really giving us the opportunity to take interesting plant-based products into ready-to-eat consumer products. Just been working for 3 years on a CSIRO oat project and got some really cool oat-based dairy alternative products ready to come to market. So that will be the next phase for Fancy Plants. All the while doing that, was doing some research with Chia in the Ord, and then could see, and it's a bit of that story I think John Wood was talking about last night, and I could see this a few years ago, this declining public spend in R&D and increasing private spend, and see what's that opportunity there. So we couldn't get anyone to do Chia research in the Ord, so I took some of the guys I was working with and we started doing Chia research. Spent a lot of money developing varietal work, working with universities and building the Chia R&D, and then formed a partnership with Kimberley Ag Investments, and Jim's the MD of that. David Cross at the time was the CEO of Ordco, and myself, and formed NACRA, Northern Australian Crop Research Alliance, and started researching a range of crops across Northern Australia. And that's Alana McTiernan, the former State Minister, but had some of the most successful and well-attended field days in the Ord. And that's on the Frank Wise Research Institute, some Chia trials and in a Chia crop there. But in the last few years, what we've really been working on is cotton research and how that incorporates. Luke McKay, Nuffield Scholar, I think he was talking about how profitable cotton is, and he said if you stack the $100 bills that you make per hectare, it gets to about that much when you grow cotton. Was that right, Luke? And I was sitting there going, oh, what about Chia? The other learning was if you don't have a white Hilux in the Ord Valley, you will definitely be out of place. Fritz, I think he was laughing at me not having any idea about cotton. And that's, yeah, Luke telling us the difference about cotton. But yeah, no, we've had some really, it's been amazing watching the introduction of cotton into the Ord Valley. It's, brings a whole new level of agronomy skills, capacity, capability. Obviously comes with the capital that's made from it, but we've got collaborative research with GRDC, CRDC, CRC for Northern Australia, multi-year R&D projects. So some really cool stuff happening up there now. 5 years ago, 25% of the Ord Valley was in fallow because there weren't crops to grow, and now it's just, you can't get a square metre. New cotton gin going in 2025, I think. So yeah, it's on fire up there at the moment. And there's some corn trials and cotton trials, but it's, I mean, it's the most amazing place, and a lot of you have been there with Nuffield, but it's some really good research happening up there. Living Farm, another business I'd started when I started Chia Company, which does crop trials, and this has really evolved quickly. I won't go through it too deeply, but we've got sort of 5 business units, which is plant breeding, ag chem, horticulture, agronomic work, and then we've just recently, sort of in the last 2 years, done much more work on carbon. Our clients are the major companies like, and we do all the NVT for GRDC across WA, and that is a big project, and we put a lot of work into that and see so much value out of the NVT project for growers. Do ag chem work, all the major ag chem suppliers, and you can see the scale and size of these trials. Like, this is really specific, sophisticated work. Big teams of scientists that have to work in the field. It's actually a complex place to hire for, because you need people who've got farming agronomic skills that can drive a seeder and a tractor and a harvester, but also highly deep technical scientific skills, and trying to bring the two together is a challenge. We also have a horticulture division, which is operates right from big carrot operations on the sands north of Perth right through to the southwest, vineyards, dealing with a lot of the big vineyards, a lot of the avocado plantations. So a lot happening in hort, and it's a fascinating space. A bit of investment capital coming into that, which we work with. And a lot of our clients do the same. So the Syngenta or Bayer or whatever will swing between hort and ag. And we do agronomic projects for the grower groups, and yeah, it's a really good business, fascinating. And the outcome from R&D and how that's been adopted by farmers and then changed yields in the last decade in WA has been unbelievable. The carbon agtech, got some really smart people in the business on the tech side, and we're using that tech now to work with some of the big oil and gas companies to do surveying their plantations, whether it's above the ground, tree plantations and forestry, or whether we're doing using tech to scan for carbon in the soil. Our role in the carbon space is more about being the independent evaluator of what's happening and reporting that to the Clean Energy Regulator, rather than trying to promote carbon programs or trade carbon. So a little bit like NVT, being that independent person between the people on the property sequestering the carbon into their farm, or on the farm sequestering carbon, and the people that are getting paid for it. Because at the moment it doesn't really happen, it's pretty blurry. It's a very immature market, and the people that are getting paid for it also reporting, and I think there'll be some real evolvement in that space. Here, just some trial site locations, and like there's, I think it's 500 trials across the state. So, and then lots of little bits of kit, seeding units and drones and harvesters and spray units, and guys doing hundreds of thousands of kilometres around the state in utes, doing really good trial work. Immensely proud of it, because our track record is the highest rating R&D company in Australia for a lot of the field trial work. And Rich Devlin, my business partner in that, is probably the best researcher, field researcher in the country, and really passionate about it. And yeah, it's a good business that we've built up there, and can see a lot of opportunity going forward. The other business that Rich and I have got is called Augment Agriculture, and I guess where I'd come back to farming from Nuffield and was like upstream from farming into crop inputs and R&D, and then downstream into the food industry. And I guess a lot of passion still around farming, and this is, we started Augment Agriculture to buy, lease, manage farmland. And one of the new scholars, Shannon, their family sharecrops a lot of the farmland for us. So again, one of the connections. But this is not a large farming business. Essentially what we've looked at is trying to buy farmland next to towns, maybe with some zoning that could have future value. It can be used for R&D, so we can use the value add for some R&D sites. So you can see, this is York, just 100 k's east of Perth. We do still run a few sheep. That was an old passion of mine, which, still play around with them. And we've also bought industrial land near country towns that has got the ability to transfer into logistics hubs, grain storage and handling. Not trying to take you on steady, but we have bought one next to a CBH joint. So yeah, we see an opportunity again in value adding high value niche markets, being able to store, handle and transfer product, because that's when I started Chia, one of the real limitations was there wasn't infrastructure. Last couple of slides, and this is more to talk about the Nuffield journey for the new scholars. I'm super excited for you all. As I say, there's a blessing and a curse in Nuffield, because you're going to go and see so much and open your mind so much. But we took, the Chia journey. I travelled as a single young guy doing Nuffield, so I didn't fully appreciate the challenges a lot of the people going through, families, kids, school, what they were missing, what they were sacrificing, what their partners were doing back in Australia, running businesses. But I then did it with the Chia story. So I went to New York, set up a business there. Our twins were born in Manhattan. So it was a big change for our family and our life. And I could see the pressure that, you know, when I was doing all that stuff in Nicaragua and Paraguay and Africa, Kay was raising twins in New York, or 3 kids. And then, so yeah, really think about it. As a scholar, think about your partners that aren't travelling with you. And if they are travelling, that's fabulous, but think about it, communicate strongly, you know, bring them on a journey, because there will be a time for those partners of scholars who will freaking hate the word Nuffield. They will hate it. It'll be the last thing they want to hear. And they'll also won't, when you come back and say, let me tell you all about Nuffield again. I don't want to hear about it. Like, go and tell your mates from Nuffield about Nuffield, but I just want to get on with their life. So don't be surprised when that happens. But we've also recently, bought some farmland at York, and our family, it's been really fascinating to see kids and genetics and pedigree, and they just love farming and farm, and you know, they'll be there any minute they can get there. So yeah, that's what I want to say. I wanted to thank Nuffield because it did give me an opportunity. It's been fabulous, and meeting amazing people and doing amazing things. One thing I will make a plug for, I'm also on the steering committee of Evoke Ag, which is here in Australia next February, which is going to be an amazing conference. I think there's a couple of thousand delegates coming, and it's international and local agtech. So try and get to that. I think, yeah, my take homes from Nuffield, I mean, I'll learn a lot, but for anyone travelling, certainly be inquisitive, be interested, and be interesting. Like, don't necessarily be all about you and about Australia. I think, as John Wood said yesterday, it's good to be proud, but don't be too parochial. It pisses people off around the world if you just always, Australia, we're so much better. Like, it's fine, be confident and proud of what you're doing, but be open. And something different is not wrong. If someone's doing something different or something in a different part of the world, there's probably a lot of reasons. And I always say to my team, we've got people in Melbourne and York and all over the place, seek first to understand before you understood. Try and understand what's going on there. Why are they doing what they're doing? You know, I'm excited about someone growing 3 hectares of garlic in Flinders in Victoria. I mean, that excites me. At the same time as 50,000 hectares in Esperance. I mean, they're totally different, but they're so exciting. Someone growing something up in Kununurra, someone doing amazing things in, you know, in some of the topics last night, I was sitting there going, this is so cool. When I first did my Nuffield, there was one female travelled with us, and she didn't have the easiest time. She was the female Nuffield Scholar for the year. And I knew her from uni days, and she would say to me, this is not that easy. Some of the people she travelled with didn't make it that easy for her. Now there's, was it 60-something%, a fifth, you know, 18 out of 24, whatever the number was for her. Fabulous. And the topics are amazing, but I think don't anyone that's been in Nuffield feel you're not, you know, as highly valued or as important because of the size of the farm or the topic you're doing, or, you know, it's just so important that everyone, we get diverse thoughts, we get people involved, enthusiasm, because this is what changes industries. It will change the agriculture industry, the food industry and the Australian industry, and Nuffield's got so much power as an organisation, so I embrace it and love it. That was the point I was going to make. It's going into places where you see things done differently and you just can't understand it. Spend your energy trying to understand rather than tell them why it's so much better and different in Australia. And if you can do that, you'll be much better Nuffield scholars and ambassadors for Australia and the Nuffield badge. Thank you.